All right, man, we back. Day two. I gotta eat, so we're gonna do 15 minutes. A real 15 minutes today. Let's say 15 and counting. As you know by the title of the book, Driving the Green Book by Alvin Hall. We are on chapter one. Chapter one, The Green Book Inventor, a man of a million journeys. It is amazing to me that somebody took the time to research the information in the Green Book. It points to the resolve of black people and their willingness to be strategic. That's something I want younger organizers to think about, that we have got to be more strategic in gathering and disseminating information. The Green Book is clearly an example of working smarter, not harder. Tony Ramsey, retired lifelong resident of Birmingham, Alabama, who has always loved travel, maps, and geography. I began my adventure with a green book completely open to what this intriguing, I don't know how you say that, travel guide might teach me about history, humanity, and myself. It is not part of my personality to speculate about things in advance. So I didn't think about who had created the Green Book before I went to Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, the world's largest repository of books and other materials related to African American culture, to hold the actual guidebook in my hands. The reason I try to avoid creating narratives beforehand is because I've seen that emotional impulse inadvertently become self-fulfilling. Therefore, I will learn about the Green Book's creators, Victor and Alma Green, when I began studying the guide's many editions, as well as the other publications and books that their guide would lead me to. Before I started the research, I knew the Negro Motorist Green Book was a travel guide. I also knew that it was published before some of the major improvements in printing methods. This made me wonder whether the Green Book would have pictures. If I had any expectations before holding the guide in my hand, they would have been based on my experiences of other commercial travel guides of the time. These typically highlighted key historical events, places of interest, and businesses, hotels, restaurants, clubs, that cater to tourists and travelers. But when I first held one of the early editions of the Green Book at the Schomburg, I was surprised by how small and thin it was. Then I remembered it was designed to fit into a car's glove compartment, so it would be readily accessible during a trip. It was also an annual publication that would be replaced with a new edition each year. When I flipped through the pages, looking at the state-by-state listings, the number of places varied dramatically in the few cities and towns listed in each state. Understandably, there were more places catering to black travelers in key metropolitan areas that were the destinations of African Americans who migrated north, in the cities that were part of the route that black entertainers followed, called the Chitlin Circuit, and in cities where major historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, were located. In smaller towns, the businesses were typically tourist houses and small restaurants, usually run by a local woman. As I thought about the increase in the number of pages and listings in the Green Book, as well as ads, some pictures, and editions, subsequent editions, I realized that the publication could be seen as an indicator of economic growth within black communities and a self-created, expanding sense of freedom, although still segregated, promised by the American dream. Then I thought of the guide's creator. This innovator was born in the very same city where I sat exploring his guide's pages. Victor Hugo Green came into the world in New York City on November 9, 1892. By the age of 21 in 1913, he was a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service, working in Bergen County, New Jersey, not far from the town of Hackensack, where he had grown up. He clearly had an entrepreneurial instinct that led him to find creative ways of supplementing his modest income from the post office. For example, by 1933, he was acting as the manager to a musician, Robert Duke, the brother of his wife, Alma. We don't know much about Victor Green as a person. Little was written about him during his lifetime. However, based on what was written, as well as all that he achieved, he must have been charming and impressive. Known as a man of tremendous drive and energy, he was described in the 20th anniversary edition of the Green Book, 1956. Yeah, was described in the 20th anniversary edition of the Green Book, 1956, as a tall, well-built, always impeccably groomed, with an easy, affable manner. In addition to his keen sense of the market, Green was clearly gifted with managerial talent and what today is called emotional intelligence. Alma S. Duke, who became Victor's wife, was born in Richmond, Virginia in 1889. She moved to New York in the midst of the Great Migration. She and Victor obtained a marriage license in Brooklyn on September 17, 1917. The couple then moved to Harlem, which was swiftly becoming a national center of black art and culture. They lived in an apartment at 580 St. Nicholas Avenue, an area known as Sugar Hill because of the sweet life enjoyed by the people who lived there. We don't know exactly how and when Victor Green came up with the idea of creating a guide for black travelers, but he must have been inspired by his own experiences on the road with Alma, as well as hearing of the experiences of friends and acquaintances, both in New York and when traveling. As northern blacks with roots in the South, Victor and Alma likely trekked back home to Virginia to visit her relatives and probably to other places below the Mason-Dixon line to be with family and friends. Along the drive, they would have experienced the peculiar frustrations, indignities, and dangers that were a part of Jim Crow America and segregation. Victor's stint as manager for his musician brother-in-law would have involved booking appearances and making travel arrangements. Perhaps the stories that Alma's brother shared about his experiences on the road simultaneously disheartened and motivated Victor. It's interesting that he came up with the idea of the Green Book around 1932. Began managing his brother-in-law in 1933 and published the Green Book in 1936. It shows that he himself was dealing with the inconveniences, fears, and troubles of traveling while black in segregated America. A Guide to Survive. That first annual edition of what was then called the Negro Motorist Green Book was priced at 25 cents and, while named after its editor and publisher, also sported a green cover. No known copies of the 1936 Green Book are in existence. The oldest edition at the Schomburg is the 1937 edition. It's a mere 16 pages long and includes entries from only New York City and its environs. Green published the book in partnership with a friend, George I. Smith, who remained part of the operation for its first 2 years. William H. Green, Victor's brother, then joined the staff and served as an editor until 1945. The first several For the first several experiences of its existence, the Green Book was printed by Gibraltar Printing and Publishing Company, located at 800 6th Avenue in New York, and owned by Samuel Jacob Glenner. The first words in the 1937 edition, complete with questionable punctuation and spelling, are these: preparedness, an old but true adage. An ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. These words open an article offering advice on getting a car in proper shape for a road trip, with tips on tuning up and lubricating the engine, checking the brakes and tires, and other practical measures. But the general theme of preparing for a trip to avoid mishaps and dangers undoubtedly applied to more than the mechanics of an automobile. It was the whole purpose of the Green Book, whose black readers had to do so much more than their white counterparts when making plans to travel. For a more extended description of the origins and purpose of the Green Book, here is what Victor Green himself explained in the introduction to the 1949 edition. With the introduction of this travel guide in 1936, it has been our idea to give the Negro traveler information that will keep him from running into difficulties, embarrassments, and to make his trips more enjoyable. The Jewish press has long published information about places that are restricted, and there are numerous publications that give the Gentile whites all kinds of information. But during these long years of discrimination, before 1936, other guides have been published for the Negro. Some are still published, but the majority have gone out of business for various reasons. In 1936, the Green Book was only a local publication for metropolitan New York. The response for copies was so great, it was turned into a national issue in 1937 to cover the United States. This guide, while lacking in many respects, was accepted by thousands of travelers through the courtesy of the United States Travel Bureau, of which Mr. Chas A.R. McDowell was the collaborator on Negro affairs. More valuable information was secured. With the two working together, this guide contained the best ideas for the Negro traveler. Year after year, it grew until 1941. P.M., one of the New York's great white newspapers, found out about it, wrote an article about the guide, and praised it highly. At the present time, the guide contains 80 pages and lists numerous business places, including whites, which cater to the Negro trade. There are thousands of first-class business places that we don't know about and can't list, which would be glad to serve the traveler, but it is hard to secure listings of these places since we can't secure enough agents to send us the information. Each year before we go to press, the new information is included in the new edition. When you are traveling, please mention the Green Book in order that they might know how you found their place of business, as they can see that you are strangers. If they haven't heard about this guide, ask them to get in touch with us so that we might list their place. If the guide has proved useful to you on your trips, let us know. If not, tell us also, as we appreciate your criticisms and ideas in the improvement of this guide from which you benefit. There will be a day sometime in the near future when this guide will not have to be published. That is when we, as a race, will have equal opportunities and privileges in the United States. It would be a great day for us to suspend this publication, for then we can go wherever we please and without embarrassment. But until that time comes, We shall continue to publish this information for your convenience each year. All right, so we're going to leave off on page 17, halfway down. Little mark. And yes, sir.